Okay, so welcome to the 6th tutorial for Fusion 360. This one is going to be a bit different. We're not going to do 3 separate activities, but we're going to make essentially molds, right? We're going to make a 1-part mold and a 2-part mold, and what we're going to do is explore a bit of how we can do that using solid bodies, as well as how we can do it using mesh files or STL files. So we start with the simplest, which is the 1-part mold. And if you've ever seen a 1-part mold, it's a little bit like those DIY resin castings where you have a very simple shape, like a keychain, and you have a 1-part mold that you pour your resin or castable material into, and you just let it harden or cure. So what we'll do first is we'll create our keychain that we want to mold. In this case, you can use whatever design you want. It's recommended that they're usually more rectangular or flat. So in this case, we're going to go with a rectangle. We create a center rectangle. In this case, we'll just make something simple. We'll do a 30 width by 50 rectangle. So again, I'm pressing tab to switch between my dimensions. I'll left click, and that will give me my rectangle. And I'll fillet the edges just because I'm making a keychain. I'll leave it at 7, looks fine. I'll do the same for all corners. Hit enter. And now I've got the base of my keychain. So right now, I'm also going to create a pattern on this. What I'll do is I'll create let's just do a simple shape. We'll do a circle somewhere here. Really doesn't matter. I'll just make this 12. I'll make another rectangle. I'll put it over here and I'll intersect it in the circle. And then lastly, maybe I'll put a ellipse in here, and what I'll do is I'll just put the ellipse somewhere like so, and I want to position this maybe more inside the rectangle. So what I'll do is I'll click the center, click and drag, and now I can move it. In this case, I'll just move it here like so. So now I've got my shape. I'm not going to bother constraining this because this is just an example pattern. I'll finish my sketch, and right now what I'll do is I'll just use the shift middle click to rotate my view, and I'll first create the pattern. Now if you think about it, in a mold, whatever shape we get, we're going to have an inverse of it or a negative impression. So this pattern is, imagine it sort of mirrored as my final object. So what I'll do is I'll extrude these, I'll extrude the rectangle first. I'll select all the profiles and I'll extrude it down. About 2 millimeters is fine. I'll hit OK, new body. Automatically it will hide my sketch, but I still want to work on it. So I'll go back to my browser. I'll select my sketch and press the eye icon, or I can also press V shortcut to toggle visibility. In this case, I want to make my my circle go above the rectangle. So you see what I mean by that. So I'll press E shortcut. I'll select both profiles. I'm just going to rotate it so I can see better, and I'll move this down to 4, and I'm going to select join this time. Alright, hit OK, join. Lastly, I'm just going to select my oval, and in this case I'll just make this go to half of the length of my rectangle, in which case I'll just do 1. I'll hit join as well, and now you can see I've got my shape. So with this, I'm just going to show that my body is one solid piece. Now, again, you can press home if you ever get disoriented. For me, you can see this going down. So this time, I'm going to hit E. I'm going to select all my faces. I'm going to extrude this up by about, we'll do 3. Again, we'll hit join. And now with my keychain done, I can hit sketch and I'll show that. Now I realize maybe I want a little hole for my key ring to go through. So what I'll do is I'll go back to the sketch in the timeline, and I'll just add a circle somewhere in the middle. And I'll make this 4. Finish sketch. And again, I can go back to my sketch, hit extrude, and what I can do is I'll just extrude it up through my circle, cut, and now if I hide the sketch, you can see I've got my keyring impression. Right. So this is sort of like this is what I want to model. This is gonna be the exact replica essentially. my mold is going to have a negative face. So how would I create that? Well, if you remember the combine tool, we can basically cut this shape out of a rectangular block. So I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to go to my box. I'm going to select the top face because this is the face that I want to essentially have the maximum level of my liquid filled. In this case, it's resin or metal, whatever it is. I'm going to select the center, and just in case you can't see, I'll go to top to angle my viewpoint. Select the center. Oops, sorry, I didn't select center rectangle. Alright, right, I select the box. Doesn't matter, I'll click on the top again. And in this case, I'll just make it about this size. You can go and dimension it if you like. I'm just going to leave it as so. It's going to tell me what the height of my box is. I'm going to extrude it down to this face here, just to make sure that all my keychain is being covered, and I'll add an additional 3 to that. Now let's just say I've got some parameters here and I want to just lower this by 3. Alright, so what I can actually do is I can go here and I can go -3. And you can see it's automatically done it for me. It's made it 10. So just in case you ever need to go back and change dimensions and you don't want to have to do some complex calculations, you can always just add it as a equation. In this case, I'm going to hit enter. Oops, forgot I need to adjust this and create a new body. So again, hit enter or OK. And now you can see sort of what I mean. This is my mold, but if we look at it, if we hide our keychain, and I'll name this keychain just so you know, keychain. I'll name my body mold. And you can see my mold is still a solid block, but we want to make an impression of the keychain. So what we'll do is with both visible, we'll hit S to bring up the shortcut search, and we'll search for combine. We'll select combine. Again, our target body is going to be the mold because that's what we're cutting from. We're going to select our keychain as the object that we want to cut from it. We'll select cut. You can see a little preview. And what we're going to do is, again, we have to remember to press keep tools, because if we don't, then we're going to remove our keychain model. So with that, I'll hit OK. And as you can see, if I hide my keychain, I've got a perfect impression of my mold. Now, I could just leave it like this, and this is my mold, finished, all done. But one thing, if you've ever done molding or casting before rather, you'll notice that, especially with long surfaces like this, even with, I forget what they call, but they're like debinding agents, it's very hard to get vertical faces out of the mold. So in this case, what we want to do is we want to actually give it a tapered edge. But I didn't use any extrude tools to, create this cylinder, so I can't use the taper function within there. So how would I add a taper to, say, this cylinder in this case? How do you think? A hint is we've already used this function before, this tool. So if you remember, we used a tool called draft, right? And we used it for the doorstop. But in this case, what we can do is we can actually, similar to how we did it with the face, we will select the pull direction, right? In this case, we want this to taper away. We want our axis of rotation essentially to be this sphere. So we're going to select the top face of this cylinder. We're going to select the face on the side, and you can see that angle, that axis here. I'm not sure if you can see it well, but it's along this edge. And now if we rotate, you can see we are creating a draft, and I can adjust this however I want. In this case, I'll just do a 10-degree angle. Should be sufficient. We'll hit OK, and now as you can see, we have our tapered cylinder. And so when we mold this is going to be a lot easier to remove. It's going to be at a slope. And we can do this again with all these inner features. So let's just say I want to have my cylinder here also have a little bit of a draft. Again, I'll select the draft tool. And now let's see what if I do this. If I put it here in the middle and I select this face, you can see now I can also create an outer draft essentially. So again, I'll leave this at 10. I'll hit OK. And so now if I go from the top view, and I'm in orthographic view, so you can see that there is a slope, and so it'll be a lot easier to remove. So again, I'll do it one last time for this rectangle. So draft, I'll select the pull direction. Again, I'm making it out, so I'll select the bottom face so that my angle is here. For the faces, I'll select, what I'll do is sometimes if you don't put 0, it doesn't let you. So if you experience that issue, so let's say Fusion gives you a 10-degree angle, You'll notice you can't select the other faces. See how I'm clicking? So what you can do is you just go to your angle, select 0. It'll go back to the default, and now you can select your faces. So I'll rotate, select all my faces, and if I rotate it, you can see they're all moving now. And in this case, I'll leave it at 10. I'll hit OK. And so now when I go to actually cast this, it'll be a lot easier, even without a debinding agent, to remove these parts, essentially. So one thing you need to take note of is, especially for cast, let's just say we'll go back to the first draft we did. If we had done it the other way, so I'll do -10, you'll see that this shape makes it almost impossible to remove it, because now you can't actually pull it out. It's kind of like a lock, right? So just be careful as you're making all these drafts with more complex shapes that you appropriately draft your edges. Okay, so that's it. We can always leave the keychain there to see if we want, but for me, I'm happy with this. So this will be my 1-part mold, and so we'll move on to the 2-part mold now. And there's 2 ways you can do it. In this case, let's just say you found a thing on Thingiverse or whatever modeling library, and they give you a step file and they give you a STL file. Now, generally, you want to stick with step files because they are a bit more easier to work with. It's more of a native format. They also tend to be a bit less taxing on the computation of Fusion 360. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new design. I'm going to just go ahead and save this first anyways as a 2-part mold. So 2-part mold. Save. And so we'll start with the step version first. So in this case, if you haven't already done so, download the file for the donut. It's found in the tutorial resources on the Google Drive. But for in this case, I already have it downloaded, so I'm going to go to File. I'm going to Open. I'm going to go to Open from my computer. I'm going to select the donut step file. I'm going to hit Open. And now I have my donut within my workspace. And you can see here has been inserted as a body, right? So I'll just name this donut just for organizing. So you can see that my donut's been positioned on the XY axis. So again, like with moving bodies, I can always just select my donut, hit M. And in this case, I don't need it to be very precise. What I'll do is I'll just rotate it 90 degrees. I'll show my origin just to get it more or less in line. You can see I'm quite a bit off in 3D space. So I'll go to the top. I'll move this here. And you can see it's still not in the center. I can always use the box move, and I'll position it a little bit more finely. So I've got it aligned vertically like so. Move up, somewhere there. So I'm going to hit left, align myself. I'll drag it up, and I would say somewhere there is fine. Doesn't have to be precise, just as long as it's somewhere in the middle. It's good enough for me. So right now I've got my donut. This is what I want to mold, right? So similar to how we did it with the 1-part mold, we're essentially creating 2 1-part molds and then connecting them together, adding a funnel to pour our liquid curable resin or metal for casting. So very similarly, we're also going to create a box, right? So we go back, we select box. I'm just going to create it in the, well, see in this case, my donut is in the middle. So if I create a box, it's going to go encompass only half. So what I'll do is I'll just I just realized something. I forgot to include the timeline. So remember to always do that. So I'll right click, capture design history, and now I have it in my timeline. I've only just moved my model, so it's not that big of a deal, but if you were to start making all the edits, then that would be quite disastrous. But anyway, I'll construct an offset plane. I'll select the bottom plane, and I'll move it down. Again, just somewhere there, I'll just do 20. You can adjust this later. For now, I'll select OK. I'll hide my origin. I'll create my box again. And again, you don't have to create a box. You could create a cylindrical mold, right? So it's just whatever makes sense for your shape. In this case, I'll just stick with a box because it's what we are familiar with. So I'll select the top edge and I'll just drag it to encompass my entire donut. And so again, it's going to ask me to create my box shape. So I'm going to drag it up. I'll select new body, go all over. In this case, it's 40. It's fine. I'll hit OK. And now I can't see my body, my shape inside, and how do I know I've actually covered everything, or do I have like a 1mm gap on the top? So what you can actually do is, first I'll name this my mold, right? And what we can do is we can right click and we can select, should be here, so opacity control, right? And here I can select, I'll just do 50, and you can see now I can see through my body. I've adjusted the opacity, and now if I'm looking at it, there's plenty of space on the bottom, sides, everything looks fine. So that's okay. I'm just going to revert it back to 100% opacity. But that's one way you can also check it. Another way is you can go into section analysis, select the plane, and you can sort of see through each part along each plane. And it seems okay as well. So hit cancel. Now, what we want to do is we want to again combine this, right? We want to cut the negative impression into the box. So what we'll do is we'll select combine, again S for the shortcut, combine, select combine, and we're going to select our body, which is the box we want to cut that away from. And sometimes you can see the other body through the target body in this case, but if you can't for whatever reason, don't worry, you can always select the body here in the browser. So you can see it's selected. I've got cut, that's fine. We're going to keep the tools. We don't have to, but I'll just keep the tools. And so now if I hide my donut, and again, I'll just go into section analysis, you can see I've got my impression of my donut. I've essentially created a hole inside the box that's shaped as a donut. So in our two-part mold, what we want to do is we want to split our body, right? We want to split it in half so we can join it together. So how do we split this body in half perfectly in the center, you reckon? So we can construct a mid plane. So we select the top plane and the bottom plane, because now this will give us a mid plane that's perfectly in between these two faces. So I'll hit OK, we've got a top plane, and what we're going to do is we're going to split this body in half. Now what can I do? I can draw a sketch, rectangle, cut, copy and paste, a bit of a hassle. Instead, what I'll do is I'll go to S to bring up my shortcut, and I'll look for split body here. So split bodies, with that selected, I'll select my body to split, which is the box. I'll select my splitting tool, which is the plane that I want to split it in half with. Hit OK. And now you can see that I've got two bodies now, right? So I've got, that's my bottom one. I'll just name this bottom mold. And this will be my top mold. So top mold. So now if I hide it, and I can hide the construction, you can see that I've got one half of my mold, and if I look at the other side, I've got the other half of my mold. See? So now that I've got my shape done, what I want to do is I want to have a way to align these, right? Because if you think about it, let's just pretend I'm actually trying to mold this, and pretend I've got a spout, and it's just misaligned like this. Now my shape is going to be disastrous, right? My donut is essentially going to have a huge gap. So the way you can do this is very simply, I'm going to Ctrl Z to undo my move, is I'll go and hide the top one. I'll select the face that I want to work on, and I'll select create sketch. This will allow me to essentially work on the face and make sure that it is on the same plane as that face. So what I'll do is I'll very simply create a circle. It's a demonstration. And I'll make this 10, doesn't matter. What I'll do also, just to make my life easier, is I'll just hit a point and I'll put it anywhere, somewhere here, let's just say. And I'll do it for the other four corners. It doesn't matter where you place them. So now that I've got this sketch, I could, if I wanted to, make a cylinder. And this might be one way to basically create my alignment pin, so to speak. So I'll just hit join, it's okay. Again, because it will hide my sketch once I use the command, I'll show it again. An alternative is I could create a sphere, right, an hemisphere, so that it will essentially take on that roundage. It will sort of guide it in because it's a sphere. Might be easier to print as well. So what we'll do is we'll go into sphere. Right now we're going to create a sphere. Now when you're creating a sphere, what you're going to do is you're going to select the plane. In this case, I'll select this one. And yeah, I created the point there just to sort of guide me. But for me, I don't really care the placement. So what I'll do is I'll place it just here. And right now you can see it's given me a very small sphere. And I want this to, let's just say, be 10, same as my cylinder. And what you can notice is that my sphere is actually being created from the center point of where I clicked essentially. So depending on where you want your sphere to appear on the model itself, you have to be quite precise with where you place it. In this case, I'm just going to leave it. I'm just going to select join. Got a sphere there. Hit OK. And then I can basically work with this. Now, I just want to use a sphere for all 4. So what I'll do is I'll delete my cylinder. I can go back. I don't really care about the sketch anymore. So I'll hide that. And I remember I joined my sphere, right? So if I want to make this appear on all 4 corners, what are 2 ways I could do it? Yep, so I could use rectangular patterns with a new body. So I have to go back to sphere and I have to make sure it's new body, right? So I can actually select it and duplicate it. So yes, so the first one, which would be the rectangular pattern. I forget where it is, but just rectangular pattern. Now this is the 3D body, not the sketch rectangular pattern. So I can select body. I can select my axis, which is just left and right in this case. So I'll move it out. I just want 2. And I'll move it out in the other way. And again, I just want 2. Right. Select new should be fine. Yep, okay. And now I've got 4 spheres perfectly aligned against each other. But if say now this is quite it's a nice circular shape. What if I just want one more sphere here? Very simply, I can also just click on the ball, use the shortcut Ctrl+C, click on the canvas, can just click here, doesn't matter really. I can click on the canvas. Whoops, hang on. Why isn't it letting me? Well, no matter, we just use the copy tool. So, okay, so just note here, move objects is selected as faces. We want the body, right? So make sure you select body, just take note of that. We've got the thing here, we'll create a copy. And again, we'll just move it wherever using the box little thing. Move it here in the center, hit OK, and now I've got my ball positioned wherever I want to. And if I ever want to move this again, I can just hit M and reposition it however I want. In this case, I don't want to, so I'll just Ctrl+Z. So now I've got this shape, I can again combine. And what I'll do is I'll combine all, I'll select my target body as the mold. Select all my spheres. I won't keep the tools because I don't need them. I'll select join. And you'll see all these bodies. Oh, I forgot to select the last one, sorry. You see all these bodies, they're gonna basically be joined to the bottom mold. Hit OK. And now I have one single body. So to make the negative impression of this, same as with regular casting or molding, we're just going to show the top mold. Going to press repeat or combine. Select the target body. Select our tool body as the bottom mold. Cut. We're going to want to keep the tools, obviously. Hit OK. And now if we check our top mold, you can see that there is a perfect negative impression again. And if you want to double check that, we can also go into section analysis, select the plane, and you can see that my sphere in the middle has that complementary part. See, it's all fitting perfectly. So lastly, now we need an area that we can actually pour the mold into. In this case, you might want to put it on the side. I'm just going to demonstrate here on the top just as an example. I'll put a hole tool, right? I'm going to select the top face, and I can essentially position it where I want. This is way too big for now, obviously. So in this case, I'll make this much smaller. Let's just do 5. Yeah, you can see I can also adjust my height. So in this case, I don't want to go through my entire model or just spill out. So I'll just roughly do 14. That should be fine. Again, we don't have to worry too much about the actual hole type since we are just making a hole. Select the objects to cut. Top mold only, that's fine. Hit OK. And now we have our hole. So again, if we look in section analysis, we can see this is an area where we can then insert our liquid. And of course, you can always put more holes to allow air to escape because this is a donut shape, gases will get trapped. But I won't do it for this example. So now in case you find this hole is very hard to fit into, we can again make it in more like a funnel. Select the chamfer tool, the top side, and we can increase the edge, making it a little bit easier for us to pour. And again, just one last time, if we check, you can see now that should make it a bit more like a funnel. You can pour the liquid inside. And so, So that's it. That is our two-part mold using a step file that we imported into Fusion essentially, right? When you're making the alignment pins or whatever you want to call them, think of it as just you're making a mini mold of your mold, right? Imagine if you were trying to make a two-part mold of a sphere. You would essentially use the same tools, the same combined features to create that shape, negative impression. So the way you can combine bodies in Fusion using the combine tool, because maybe you might not be too familiar, right? So if I hit combine, you can see there's a few types. There's join, cut, intersect. What do these do? Join and cut, you know what they do. But what does intersect do, right? So I'll just demonstrate this here, since it's been asked. For this demonstration, I'm going to just create a box. I'll just hide this to not clutter it. So again, I'll just select any plane, it doesn't matter. And I'll make a 50 by 50 box, okay? Okay, we'll make this 50 as well. So it's a perfect cube. Okay, and so what now I'll do is I'll create a sphere and I'll just create it on this endpoint there. So I'll select this point. I'll select the face, which is where my point is on. I'll create the point and now I've got a sphere. I'll make this, let's just do 30. Maybe a bit bigger, 40, just so you can see. But, you know, I think that's still too small. I'll do 50. Okay. So I don't want to cut, I'll just create a new body, right? So now we have a sphere and we have a cube. Now, just to make this a little bit easier for you to sort of visualize, I'm going to shell this. Just use shell. So I'm going to select the bottom face. That will give me a shell. I'll make it 3 millimeters. Okay, remember if I select just one face, it's going to shell it inside like so. So you can see the cube sort of peeking through. If I were to now combine it, select the box, the cube, select join. We're going to keep the tools, hit OK. We have our body here as an example. It's one solid body. And if I try to see the geometry, I'm going to go to section analysis for that. You can see as I move in that my entire cube has been essentially welded into my body, right? You can see it's all one body, the edges are all combined, like this. See? So now, what if I do cut instead? I'm sure you know, so I'm going to go back to my combine. I'll select cut instead, hit OK, and you don't need a section analysis. You can see it's taken a bite out of my box. So what if I do intersect, you think? So if I go back and I select intersect, what's happened there?
It's the cut region, only the cut.
So what does this remind you of? Did it in primary school or whatever, elementary? What's a 2D representation of this, you think? Venn diagrams. So you have a Venn diagram. You have, you know, one circle, two circles, and then it overlaps. All intersect does is it takes the body that is within that overlap, in this case. So of course, with CAD modeling, you don't need a circle as a Venn diagram. It could be a square, tube, coil, doesn't matter. This intersect is going to take only this intersecting points. Basically, if two bodies are overlapping, select those bodies only and create a new body from it. So if I hit OK, you can see now this is my new shape, right? This used to be the edge of my cube, which I hollowed, and then my sphere, it now takes on the form of that shape. So this is some way you can create unique geometry, especially with surfaces. But just so you know the exact ways you can use the combine tool, right? Play around, figure out what you can do with it. If we look back at the spheres, again, our sphere is a body, and we don't want to create an intersection. We want to cut away this sphere so that it can fit onto our top mold. Because if we didn't, let's just say we rectangle and combine, and we didn't bother to cut away the top surface, what you see is, pretend let's say our donut is in there, and I go into section analysis, you can see now that this edge here might be a bit hard to see, but there's a line. This shows that there is an intersecting body, essentially. And if we double check it, let's just say, remember intersecting, combine, select the top and the bottom, gonna select intersect, and you can see, hang on, our spheres are intersecting. Our donut isn't though, because we cut away from that, remember? So if we were to do intersect, hit OK, it's only going to keep these parts of our spheres, because those are the parts that's eating into the top mold. We don't want that because we want it to fit, therefore we combine it like so. And now if we go to combine, I move the timeline just for sake of ease. because I've already done it. If I select that, there's nothing to intersect essentially. I mean, it's just the body. So you can see there's no spheres anymore. So it can be any shape. You can make it a square, you can make it a hexagon, whatever's easiest for you to connect essentially. I find spheres are just easier, so do what you want, whatever makes more sense. Okay, so then we'll move on to the last one, which I think you guys will be more interested in, because most files, when you download them off Thingiverse or Couch or wherever, they'll usually give it to you as an OBJ or STL file, which is a mesh file. Let's just say I went on Thingiverse and I looked up and I want to print this, or I want to mold this, sorry. I'll do is I'll go to File, I'll open, and I can open my STL file from this way, but I find it's a lot easier if I just use the Insert Mesh tool here. So what I'm going to do is going to select Insert Mesh, going to select the STL I want, and now it's given me an STL file right here. Now the good thing about this Insert Mesh tool is that I can then go, I want to center it to my origin, so let's just say my origin's here. See, it's far away. I want to center it, I can select Center. My origin is now centered to the middle of my STL. Or if say I want him, this little Among Us guy, to be standing on the bottom plane, I can select Move to Ground, and now he's standing on there, you see? So in this case, I'm making a mold, so I'm okay with center, makes things easier. I'm gonna hit OK, and now I've got my mesh file, right? And just so in case you're not realizing it here, but this mesh is not a solid body. If I try, I'd be surprised if this works because old school Fusion wouldn't let you do this. But let's just say I want to cut a little hole in his belly. Oops. So I'm making a sketch here. You don't have to follow me, I'm just demonstrating. And I select Extrude. You can see I don't have any cut options because there is no solid body. I can create a new body, a solid body, that's fine. But I can't cut it. It's not a body. You're trying to create a model that is both a mesh and a solid body, which just isn't work. It's not going to work unless you use form modeling, but that's a little bit more in the future. So I've shown you that it's not actually a solid body. I can't do the regular commands. So in this case, if I can't do the regular commands using the solid workspace, what I can do is I can just switch over to the mesh workspace. And now whatever I do here is going to work on my mesh. So let's just say right now we want to create our box, right? But there's no box tool here. But what do? We can't combine, we can't cut unless we have a mesh box. Do I go on Thingiverse and search for a box that is exactly 100 millimeters by 20 millimeters, blah, blah, blah? No. You can go to Solid. We'll go to Create. Again, we'll make our box. We'll select the middle plane here, the XY. Again, similar to our donut, we'll just make a arbitrary number. We'll go out. In this case, actually, I do want it to be in the middle. So what I'll do is just offset the plane again. I'll just put it about there, looks fine. Once again, create box. Extrude it out. You can see it's not cutting the thing at all. Hit OK, new body. And I can again check to make sure everything's sealed off by going to opacity, and I'll select 50. And you can see it's well encased within my box. I'm happy with that. So I'll go back and I will undo that opacity. Back it to 100. So again, I'll hide my origin. So now we have a box. But if I try to combine, I'll select this and I'll select my Among Us. I can't, right? It's not letting me. There's no tool. Cut? No. It's not a surface, it's a mesh. So I can't edit a solid body with a mesh like this natively. But what I can, no. So what, no, there's no point really. What you can do instead is you can just go to mesh, keep things simple, tessellate. You can even see the icon here, it's a solid body to a mesh. It does exactly what it means. You select the body, you can leave these as defaults, you can play around with the refinement, but I'll just leave it as defaults. And I'll hit OK. And you can see now my body has gone from a solid to a mesh. You see? And so now if I try to combine, and I must make sure to select the mesh combine here, which you can see by the different color. Remember, blue is for solid, yellow is for mesh, orange is for surface, and then purple is for form. In this case, I'll select combine. My target body is the same, it's the box. I'm going to select the two bodies, and now I can select it. I'm going to select cut. Might be intersect or cut, I can't recall. I'll just keep the tools, and I'll hit OK. Give it a second. Depending on your laptop, it'll either be slow or fast. I'm gonna hide my Among Us figure. So if you notice, if I try to go to split body, there's no split body but for mesh. I can't. Because remember, it's not a solid body anymore. And we can't use extrude we can't draw like a sketch and cut the body out with an extrude because it's not a solid body. So what we can do is we can use a plane cut. So we're gonna select the body. We're gonna select our cut plane, which in this case, we know it's centered, so we'll select this XY. And you can see it's going to cut it in half, right? Think of it this way. Our mesh doesn't have an internal geometry, right? It is manifold, but it's not got any internal geometry, not like the way the solid body does. If you can see here, it might be a bit hard to see, but there's no actual solid. That's why you can see this surface. So what do we need to do? We need to fill it all up. And what do we have here? There's a fill. Now we can select uniform or minimal. Doesn't really matter. I'll just select uniform. And I'll hit K. And now it's given me a surface to basically fill it with. So now this is a manifold object, right? Meaning it's got all the surfaces connected. If I hadn't done the fill, I'll show you. No fill. Hit OK. You can see I don't have that surface, right? So by filling, I've essentially created a surface on the front here that is complementary. So now if I go back to my Among Us, you can see it fits perfectly in there. Yeah, doesn't matter. What I'll do is I'll just create another body again. It should have saved my other side. I'm not sure why it didn't. But no matter, again, I'll go back to the solid. I'll create my sketch. Oops, sorry, I'll create a box. Stick. Select there. Again, I'll just select the edge here. Doesn't matter. Select there. This one I want to extend out. 70 is fine. New body. Again, what do we do now from here?
Mesh.
So we go to mesh. We're gonna go to tessellate. Select the box. You can just leave it as defaults for now. Hit OK. We've got our mesh. So what do we do now?
Combine.
Combine. So there's a shortcut here if you want. I'm just gonna select that, or you can press S. Gonna select the box. Gonna select our two body, which is the Among Us figurine. Again, cut. We'll hit OK. Give it a second. And now, if I'm not wrong, it should actually be fine. See? So we've cut it. The reason why we have this surface is because we didn't split it, remember? The first one we split, but the second one we didn't. So that's why when we cut the shape, Fusion's basically going to automatically fill this in for the rest of us. So now if we go back to our mold, so let's just call this the front mold. And we'll call this the rear mold. I mean, you can name it whatever you want. Now we have our mold. If we hide our body and we go to section analysis, you can see we have our Among Us figure here. See? Now again, there's no volume because it's a mesh, but there is a surface, so it is manifold. So we can see it's all in there. It's fine. We're happy. How do we then create a pour spout on the top? We need to have the little thing that we can pour liquid into. How do we do it with a solid body?
Small on the top surface and then cut it.
Yeah. So again, we don't want to bother with mesh for solid body modeling. We'll go back to solid. Here we can just create a sketch. We'll select the top plane here, which we don't have in this case. I'll just make an offset. It's faster. Higher. Make sure it's over my box. I'll hit OK. I'll select my plane, create a sketch. Hit the circle, because I'm making a funnel. I'll select the center point. And I'll make this, let's just do 30. Actually, we'll do 25, I think. Yeah, 25. Right, we'll hit, we'll left click or hit enter. We'll finish the sketch. And now we can extrude this down, right? And we can't see it now, but we'll just extrude it down to -20. Let's just do -20. Okay. But we don't want our pour spout to be so massive, right? We want it to sort of be tapered in. So now that we're creating the cylinder, we don't have to use the draft function. We don't have to create chamfers. We can just use the taper angle here. And we'll make this 25 degrees. It's fine. So you can see this is going outwards, that's the wrong way. So what I'll do is I'll select and make it a negative. Now our thing is going in the right way. We'll hit new body, okay. And like our box, we have a solid body that we want to cut out from our mesh. So again, we go to tessellate, mesh, tessellate, we'll tessellate this cone. Again, hit OK, it's fine. You can see now that there's a lot more facets because it's a more complex shape, it's curves and stuff. So in this case, similarly, we're just going to combine. We'll select our target body, our tool body, we'll keep the tools, hit OK.
Target body is the single body.
Sorry?
That has been combined.
Yeah, so we are cutting the mold boxes essentially.
You don't
Right.
cut both.
Actually,
No, not both because we can't select both. So if I want to, that's why I selected keep tool. So if I hadn't selected keep tool, let's just say, hit OK.
no, you can't undo.
Now I don't have my sphere and I only got half a cut. So because I want to use it again, right, I'm going to go back and select keep tool, hit OK. I mean, if you forget, don't worry, you can always go back in your timeline and adjust it. I'm going to repeat my combine. So again, I'll select my box, I'll select my tool body, which is my cone. And maybe this time now I don't need it anymore. Now I won't select keep tool. Hit OK. And automatically you see my body 3, which is my cylinder, is gone. And I have my cut. See? So now if I hide my front mold, it's not gone deep enough. No worries.
Okay, I did it.
We'll go back here and we'll make this go down to 25. Now this is more than fine. Hit OK. And again, remember I made edit in my timeline, so everything in the front is going to carry forward. It takes some time to process, but it should now reflect like so. And now I have my hole. I've got my mold. And so now if I want to just 3D print this mold, I can just go back to, I can either do each individual one, and I can select, say I want to select my front mold first. I'll right click, save as mesh. I can select it as a STL. You want to select binary, not ASCII. It's just simpler. So select save, hit OK. I'll save it in my downloads. It's fine, front mold. I'll save it. And what I'll do is I will look up for Cura. So I'm in Cura right now. Play around with these settings yourself, it's fine. I'm just going to go to prepare, the usual, open my front mold, and you can see now I've got my STL, and I can print it. I can scale it if I want here or in the model, it doesn't matter. I'll just rotate it, and now I can 3D print my own mold, you see? So the STL format is very compatible with Cura and all these 3D printing softwares, and I'm sure you're aware. So I'll close this, I don't need this. So I can just right click here on my body itself, in this case the mesh, save as mesh, right?
If we wanted to combine all these in a single body, then what is
In the single one, and just right click on the entire parent component,
okay,
save as mesh, and now it will save. You can see how everything's highlighted, you can save as it. If say you have hundreds and thousands of meshes, which you really wouldn't, but let's just say you have a lot, you can always just select one file per body. So in structure, by default it'll be one file. If I save this, it's going to create one single mesh file, which I can't split apart unless I have another software to do it. But in this case, I can select one file per body, and it will save it as, in this case, I've got my Among Us, so 3 separate mesh files. Yes. If I hit OK, it'll save. I'm not going to do it in this case. You can do it yourself. Okay. So this is how you would create a mold using a mesh, especially one that you just downloaded from, what do you call it? Thingiverse. But as you can see, compared to the step file, the solid body modeling, it's a lot more tedious. You have to convert each solid body into a mesh and then, adjust it that way. So now the question I was asked is, how do I then convert this to back to a solid body, right? Now, first I'll explain the tool. So what I'll do is I'll go to this file which I've prepared here. And I can see here I've got this. This is a maze file that you can sort of 3D print and make yourself, right? This is the final one. It's sort of a backup. I'm going to create a new design first. And I'm going to, again, insert mesh. I'm going to select the 3D printable maze puzzle box. Hit OK, open. Again, I'm going to center and move to ground this time, just so that I have it in my origin. You can see there. I'll move to ground. Hit OK. Hide my origin. And so now, this is a far more complex shape, right? But if you think about it from a CAD point of view, it's just a cylinder, some chamfers and whatever. Now, I can't do solid body modeling with this. And what am I going to do? Am I going to use this and reference it and draw sketches and create a new one? If you're old school, then yes, you would. But Fusion has a function. But again, we are in a mesh, we're working with a mesh file. We have to go to the mesh workspace. And what you can find is under modify, there is convert mesh, right? And that is self-explanatory. You select the mesh. Now there's parametric and there's base feature. You generally want to stick with parametric because you're doing parametric modeling. Base feature is just sort of like if you're not going to do a lot of edits after. If I just want to make this convert this into a solid body and then insert it into another design, I can leave it as a base feature. For now, I'll use parametric. It does take a little bit longer. And I can choose faceted or prismatic. Now, faceted just means, if you can see the image, there's all the tessellations. It just means when it creates my solid body, it's going to keep each and every tessellation as a separate edge. So let me just do that as an example here. It might take a while. I might even crash my Fusion. Okay, so you see how this is a solid body, right? If I go to my solid tool, let's just say I want to extrude this face, I can extrude it. It's an individual face. It's now a solid body. Double check. See, it's there, solid. But all these faces are horrible, right? And now if all I'm interested in just making this surface flat, what I can do is I can just select maybe a few faces, doesn't really matter. You play around with it and delete, press delete. You can see now it's a flat surface. If I select it, I can now extend the height. So that's a very quick and easy way of just editing it. But in this case, I don't want it to be so hectic. I want it to look nicer. So I'll undo everything. And you'll see now I'll try and make it, oops, I need to go back to mesh. I'll try and make it a prismatic, right, which is what I want. I want it to be nice and smooth. I'm gonna hit OK. You see I get an error. Why is that, you think? Yeah, I also don't know, to be honest. I suspect it's because of the face count. No, really, it's just how it is. But don't worry, there is a way to sort of fix this. It's a little bit hacky, but you see this, generate face groups. What face groups are is it's basically telling Fusion, here's a mesh, go and calculate and see how many surfaces you can make from this mesh. And it's going to do its best to say, okay, this square here is a face, this chamfer or fillet here is a face, this one is a face, blah, 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 and it keeps doing that. So I'm going to, if you can select fast or accurate, fast is, as it says, fast, accurate is accurate. I'm going to select accurate, hit OK. This may take some time.
One eternity later.
So now you can see there's face groups. Each of these are now separate faces. If I go back to modify, oh, by the way, if you can't see these faces, just hit Shift F, shortcut, you should be able to see it, or go to inspect, display mesh face groups. We are going to now go back to convert mesh. We're going to go to our prismatic, select these, hit OK, and it should work. See? Now it works, right?
Now it is a solid body.
Now it's a solid body. Not yet. It's actually a surface, you see?
Got it!
Still a surface.
It's a surface, you can see that, right? Why is that? Let's look around. There's surfaces missing. So again, it's not always perfect, but a way we can fix this, and if you can't see, maybe there's some very tiny surfaces, we can go to, now we're in surface, right? So we go to surface workspace, we'll hit stitch, and we'll select this one first. We can't see anything, that's fine, we'll hit OK, and all of a sudden, it's become a body, you see? We've stitched the surfaces together to create a body.
Now it is a body.
Now it's a body.
Solid body.
Now I'm going to go to stitch again, hit this, but now you can see the red lines. This means there are missing surfaces, so it cannot, it's a non-manifold object. We are just going to hit cancel here. We are going to select our patch again, so I have to speed up here, but select this patch, hit OK, keep repeating it for each of these edges. I'm just going to select the ones I can see, and don't worry if you miss a few, you can again go to stitch and check there. So I've selected all the edges. I'll select stitch, select my surfaces, select these, hit OK, and now I've patched everything. It's a solid body, you see, and now I can adjust it however I want, extrude, cut, whatever I want. Okay.